sets of questions today. So the first one, I just want to hear about your experience as a special educator.
Okay.
Knowing that this will be like some of the first like footage that our graduate students see. So they take a module called the role of the special educator, and it's to give them a taste of just how diverse it is in special education, from you know being a co-teacher all the way to being a self-contained teacher, and just how fluid and flexible your role is over
Okay.
the course of your career. Um, so, first question, it introduce yourself. So your name, what you teach, both grade level and content, disability specific, and where you teach.
Okay. My name is Errin Smith. I teach primary autism K through 2. I teach all core subjects, and I teach at John Burroughs Education Campus.
Great. Can you give us an overview of the different roles that you've held in your as a special educator? So you can start by saying, when I first started teaching, I was in this type of setting, and take us all the way to today.
Okay. When I first started teaching, I was at a non-public day school for kids who had were on the lower spectrum of autism. So instead of teaching more academics, we focus more on behavior. So basically trying to implement replacement behaviors for all the problem behaviors that all students had. So it was a lot of data taking and using different strategies to hopefully decrease their behaviors over time. While in Maryland, I worked in 2 classrooms, one primary, one intermediate, and basically the role and the function were the same. Once I got here, behavior wasn't necessarily put on the back end, but it was more academic led and academic focused. So it required me to come up with different strategies of how to serve 8 kids who were all on so many different levels when it came to all the core content. So it really required me to study and just come up with different strategies and individualized plans to serve all of my kids.
What does a typical day look like for you?
No day is the same at all. And I recently have come to that conclusion because one day my kids will be great, they'll sit down, they'll do exactly what I want them to do, and then there are other days that nothing that I plan goes. So typically I try to remember that it's not, they have a disorder, they have a problem, and it's my job to not necessarily react negatively to their behaviors, but rather come up with different strategies to get them back on task or get them back to where I want them to be.
Outside of providing instruction for your students, what other responsibilities do you have as a special educator?
My other responsibilities as a special educator are to hold IEP meetings, are to communicate with parents on every other day basis, to do progress reports, report cards. I also have interactions with the gen ed kids. I have lunch duties and various duties all around the school.
Great. What do you like most about your role?
What I like most about my role is I enjoy seeing the small changes in my students. A lot of times teachers look for big growth, but in a self-contained autism class that isn't always the case. So for example, I had a kid 2 or 3 years ago that couldn't even write his name when he came into my room, and then all of a sudden one day he was on the whiteboard writing his name, and it was just like totally took me back because I realized that he was actually picking up at least something that I had been teaching him for the course of the year. So it's definitely the small things that keep me going and keep me motivated throughout the course of any year.
That was actually going to be a question. I mean, teaching in a self-contained autism classroom is definitely, I have so much respect for you. I think
Thank
that
you.
is definitely the hardest job of all special education. What is it about teaching in a self-contained autism classroom that's kept you in this type of setting?
I like this might be a bad word, but I like the freedom of it. I can kind of choose what I want to do and what I don't want to do. I'm not held to standardized tests. I'm not held to school-wide data. So it really gives me the liberty to teach the skills that I feel are important And even though I do use the scope and sequence that DCPS provides, a lot of times it's too detailed. So I'll just pick out those major points that I think my kids need, and then go from there. Did that answer that question?
It's true. That's why. Yeah. Yep. What do you think? What are some of the characteristics or qualities that a special educator needs to have to do the role well?
Patience, and more patience. There are times where I have to take Errin out of the equation and do what's best for my kids. And a lot of times, I'm a human being, I get angry, but I can't let that affect what I do on a daily basis. So patience is definitely the first one. Just having a respect to realize that all kids are capable of learning, no matter how severe their disability is. And it might not be something that is, monumentous. It might be something that's very small, and it wouldn't necessarily matter to a lot of people. So patience, caring for kids, and just having fun. Like, you have to have fun in this job. Thankfully, I've had paraprofessionals now and in the past that know what needs to be done, but we can also have dialogues and have good conversations with one another. And they help me a lot in making sure that I'm in check, I make sure that they're in check, and it just really provides a fun environment, because if you're just in here on a daily basis going through the work, it becomes very monotonous, very boring. So having a good base around you definitely helps.
That's a great segue. I was wondering if you could talk about who you collaborate regularly to support your students. And you can talk about paraprofessionals, colleagues in the building, related service providers. But if you talk a little bit about who you collaborate, let's start with just telling us, like, who do you regularly collaborate?
I collaborate with the gen ed kindergarten teacher, and as well as my 3 paraprofessionals. 2 of the paraprofessionals were teachers before, so they have a lot of ideas of what to implement. Sometimes, it might be a little too rigorous, so then it becomes my job to figure out how to modify it and best serve my kids.
What does like a typical collaborative meeting look like between you and your paraprofessionals? Like, do you have a set time that you meet with them? Do you have an agenda? Like, how does that work? How do you make that work?
It really depends. So as soon as we get in here at 8 o'clock, we're on the move. I have meetings to go to 4 times a week. They have cafeteria duty, so sometimes we don't always get to collaborate in a formal setting. So sometimes it's when the kids have just come in the building, I've just got them set down, I'll be like, look guys, this is what we need to do, and hit a few points. There are times, however, that I ask them to come in early, and we'll sit down, I'll have an agenda of what we need to go over and what a particular thing or a task might look like, model it to them, show them how to tag data, and then throughout the day, I'll periodically check on them and go and see if what we talked about is being implemented.
Great. Let's talk a little, we'll kind of like shift gears now.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about just working with students with autism.
Uh-huh.
So could you describe the behavior supports that you have in place for your students?
The main behavior support I use is a token economy. So basically it's a token board with stars on it. They have what they're working for, and that generally keeps them going. And a lot of times when they are off task, I can point them back, what are we working for? And then they come back to task, and then they'll get a reward for 5 to 10 minutes. Usually all my kids love the iPad. It's what they go to. So a token economy definitely helps. For some of my kids, I have behavior plans where it talks about all of their negative behaviors and how I can replace them. It can be difficult at times because you have 8 kids who are very different and some have severe behaviors, some are very mild. So it can be very difficult to rein in on all of them. So I typically try to focus on 1 or 2 at a time, get those problem behaviors under control, and then address the other kids.
I think I think a big misconception for new teachers working with students with autism is like I can just tell and this is actually any teacher, I can tell a student what to do and they should just intrinsically want to comply. Could you talk a little bit about why that's not the case with students with autism and why you need to use something like a token economy to get them to buy in?
Well, from what I have learned with kids with autism is they're just not motivated by what you and I might be motivated by. You know, if your teacher told you, you know, let's do this, knock this homework assignment out, and you not get any reinforcement by it, it's fine. But kids with autism don't necessarily work that way, and I'm not sure why. But they are definitely, some of them anyway, are just not influenced by the things. So you need those positive rewards, those reinforcements there, so that they will be more likely to continue working. If that makes sense.
So I noticed you use the Edmark program.
Love it.
Yeah, could you just tell us why you like working with that program, or like why you found it to be particularly effective?
The sentence before that, actually, can you just explain what Edmark is?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then dive into why you use
All right.
it. Thank you.
The Edmark reading curriculum is a whole language reading curriculum. So it's based, there are several components. There is word recognition, there are stories, phrase match, picture match, and they come